He once said, "The first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily." Most people never understood what he meant. They thought he was talking about money. He wasn't. Charlie Munger built his fortune not through risk, but through patience, the kind that only time can teach. He didn't chase markets, or miracles, or moments of luck. He built a system so strong that it didn't need him to be brilliant, it just needed him not to be stupid. And that's the truth most people don't learn until after 50. That survival, not speed, is what keeps you rich forever. When you're young, you think wealth is about winning. You think it's about spotting the next big thing, timing the trade, making the right call. But the older you get, the more you realize. Wealth isn't earned in moments of victory. It's protected in moments of restraint. Munger called it anti-fragility, the ability to grow stronger through pressure, not break under it. When others panic, you wait. When others sell, you hold. When others follow trends, you stand still long enough to see what's real. Because in the long game of wealth, the winners aren't the fastest, they're the last ones standing. He once joked, "The world isn't driven by greed. It's driven by envy. And envy is what destroys most fortunes. It makes smart people chase what they don't need, and abandon what they've already built." But Munger didn't chase. He endured. He let time do the compounding, not just of his money, but of his wisdom. And by the time he reached 75, the result wasn't just wealth. It was freedom from needing more. That's the secret the young never understand. And the old finally accept. Because in the end, the one strategy that keeps you rich forever is the strength to do nothing when everything tempts you to move. Charlie Munger never lived like the billionaires people imagine. There were no private jets waiting on tarmacs, no midnight champagne meetings, no designer suits. He woke up early, read quietly, ate the same breakfast, day after day, year after year. If you ever saw him in public, you wouldn't notice him. He looked like any old man sitting with a newspaper patient, unhurried, unmoved by noise. But behind that stillness was a mind sharper than most men half his age. While the world ran faster every year, he slowed down. When markets screamed opportunity, he whispered caution. When others shouted about innovation, he asked the simplest question of all: will it last? He never wanted to be the richest man in the room. He wanted to be the one who couldn't be broken by it. That's what most people miss about wealth. It's not built by endless hustle. It's built by refusing to panic when panic looks profitable. Every decision Munger made came from restraint. He said, "We don't have to be smarter than the rest. We have to be more disciplined than the rest." And discipline doesn't make headlines. It doesn't trend. It just compounds quietly, in the background of ordinary days. He didn't check stock prices every morning. He checked his thinking. He didn't chase trends, he chased understanding. And that's why his wealth didn't vanish with every market crash. It adapted. It survived. To him, time was the only true currency. And wasting it on noise was the greatest expense a man could ever pay. He knew that success, like compounding, wasn't something you could see working day to day. It revealed itself slowly to those patient enough to wait, and wise enough not to interrupt it. And that's where the secret of anti-fragility begins, not in brilliance, but in boredom. The kind of boredom most people can't stand to live with. Before the world called him wise, Charlie Munger was broken. He lost his son at 9 years old. He lost his marriage. He lost his fortune and with it, his sense of control. Most men never come back from that kind of loss. But Munger did not by fighting harder, but by surrendering to what he couldn't control. He once said, if you're not willing to react with equanimity to a market decline of 50%, you're not fit to be a common shareholder. But that wasn't just about money. It was about life. He learned that fragility isn't weakness, it's blindness. The belief that the world will always move in your favor. And when it doesn't, it breaks you. Anti-fragility, on the other hand, is born in pain. It's the quiet acceptance that storms aren't interruptions, they're the environment itself. And those who survive them don't resist change. They adapt to it. When Munger rebuilt his life, he didn't chase wealth. He built systems that could withstand chaos. He designed his portfolio and his thinking around one idea. If it can break, I don't want it. So, he avoided complexity. He avoided noise. He avoided ego. And instead, he built strength from simplicity. He called it playing the long game in a short-term world. Every loss became a filter. Every failure, a teacher. And with each lesson, he grew quieter but stronger. The younger generation called it boring. But the truth is, boredom is the disguise of endurance. And endurance is where true wealth hides. That was the moment everything changed for him. He realized that the goal wasn't to avoid storms, it was to design a ship that could survive them. And in doing so, he found a kind of freedom most people never reach. The peace that comes from not needing the world to behave. Because once you learn how to stand still in the middle of chaos, the chaos loses its power. The years that followed would test everything Charlie Munger believed. He watched entire generations rise and fall on greed disguised as innovation. .coms promised revolutions. Crypto claimed to rewrite the rules. Every decade, a new storm appeared, louder, faster, more convincing than the last. And each time, Munger stood still. He didn't laugh at the dreamers. He just waited. Because he had seen this movie before 1,000 different times with 1,000 different names. He knew that the faces changed, but human nature didn't. That's why anti-fragility wasn't just a strategy for investing. It was a strategy for staying human in a world that worships chaos. He once said, "You don't have to pee on an electric fence to learn not to do it." Meaning, you don't need to touch every mistake yourself to understand its cost. You just have to pay attention long enough to watch others burn and learn. And over decades, he watched plenty. Smart men lose everything because they couldn't sit still. Rich men go broke because they confused action with progress. And entire nations crumble because they thought they'd outsmarted time. But Munger never confused movement with meaning. He didn't need to look busy to be right. He knew that the real game wasn't about winning. It was about enduring long enough for the odds to bend in your favor. When Berkshire Hathaway grew into an empire, it didn't happen in fireworks. It happened quietly, over breakfast meetings and patient decades. While traders made headlines, Munger and Buffett made history in silence. That silence was their advantage. Because silence compounds too, just like money. Every time they refused to react, they gained something others lost: control. And control is the rarest form of wealth. Most people spend their entire lives trying to buy it and never realize they've been selling it all along. He once said, "It's not greed that drives the world, but envy." And envy, he believed, was the great destroyer of wealth. Because envy forces comparison. And comparison forces chaos. That's why Munger refused to compete, not with others, not even with time. He understood something most people learn too late: that the man who needs nothing cannot be defeated. And that's the quiet power of anti-fragility. It's not loud. It's not glamorous. It doesn't promise 10x returns or viral success. It simply guarantees that when the dust settles, you're still standing. Through market crashes, through wars, through political madness, Munger's principle held firm. Because he built his wealth the way old trees build their strength. Not by resisting the wind, but by bending with it. And while others spent decades chasing the next miracle, he became one, not because he was faster, but because he was still there when everyone else was gone. That's what anti-fragility truly means. It's not about being unbreakable. It's about getting stronger every time something tries to break you. Most people learn that lesson after losing everything. Munger learned it early and spent the rest of his life proving it true. Because in the end, the cost of impatience isn't just money. It's peace. And once you trade that away, no fortune can buy it back. By the time Charlie Munger was old enough to be called wise, he no longer cared about being rich. He had watched men spend their lives chasing more, and end up with less. Less time. Less peace. Less of themselves. He once said, "The big money is not in the buying and selling, but in the waiting." But what he meant was bigger than money. He meant that peace, too, comes from waiting, from letting life unfold without trying to force it. After all the storms, after all the decades of quiet compounding, he realized that the real reward of patience isn't wealth. It's calm. The kind that no market crash can touch. He called it rationality, but it was really something closer to faith. A faith in time, in simplicity, in endurance. The belief that if you live long enough and think clearly enough, the noise of the world will eventually fade. And only the truth will remain. Munger didn't measure success by numbers anymore. He measured it by how little he needed to change. By how little the world could shake him. By how much peace he could hold in a time that worshipped speed and chaos. He used to say, "Take a simple idea and take it seriously." That was his quiet rebellion. In a world addicted to complication, he found strength in the simple. And power in the predictable. Every year that passed proved him right. Empires rose and fell. Trends exploded and vanished. But the patient stayed standing, untouched by the noise. Wealthy in the only way that mattered. Through peace of mind. And that's when it became clear. The real goal of wealth isn't freedom to do whatever you want. It's freedom from the need to. That's the final stage of wealth, the one people don't talk about. The one you only understand after 50. When you've seen how fast the world moves. and how little any of it really changes. He once said, "It's waiting that helps you as an investor." And a lot of people just can't stand to wait. But waiting patience is the quiet proof that you've already won. Because money can buy a house. But only patience can build a home. Money can buy safety. But only wisdom can build peace. And money can buy time. But only understanding can make it worth living. That's the truth Charlie Munger learned too late for most. But just in time for himself. That the strategy that keeps you rich forever isn't in the numbers, or the deals, or the timing. It's in the man you become. When you finally stop fighting time and start walking with it. Charlie Munger spent a lifetime studying how to stay rich. But in the end, he discovered something richer than money. Patience. Clarity. Peace. He once said, "You don't have to be brilliant, only a little wiser than the other guy on average, for a long time." But that kind of wisdom only comes when the noise stops. When you've lost enough battles to understand which ones were never worth fighting. In his final years, his life became almost painfully simple. He read. He thought. He waited. Not for wealth. Not for success. But for quiet understanding. He watched markets rise and fall. And smiled at how little it mattered. He watched the world chase new shortcuts. And knew that every shortcut had a cost. He didn't envy youth anymore. He pitied it for how fast it runs. And how little it sees. His friends said he looked calm. Almost empty of urgency. But that emptiness was full. Full of years, lessons, and peace that no number could ever measure. One evening, as the light from his study fell over a stack of old books, he whispered something to a student who asked how to become rich forever. Munger smiled. And said quietly, "Learn to want less. Then, you'll never lose." The student didn't understand it, not yet. But someday he would. After the deals were done. After the noise faded. After 50. Because wealth isn't about adding more. It's about losing less. Losing hurry. Losing envy. Losing the illusion that you can beat time. Charlie Munger didn't escape time. He walked with it. Step by step. Quietly. And in that silence, he found the one truth that keeps you rich forever. That peace is the final dividend. And time is the only currency that ever mattered.